This is the tank that NATO never dared to name, and its file still marked top secret. In this video, we'll tell you all about it and show you some interesting details from its design. What is so dangerous about it, and why did the Alliance decide not to make it public? What kind of weapons were mounted on it? Why was it abandoned? Why did they decide to keep the existence of the project in secret for so long? All of this and much more will be revealed in today's episode. It's me. This is War Explained. It all started during the Cold War. If you don't know what that is, check out our previous episodes. But to put it simply, this period was full of tension between the countries that used to be a part of the Warsaw Pact. Those led by the Soviet Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO. Both sides were looking for ways to gain an advantage over each other. And one of these ways was through new technologies and equipment. For example, we have already covered the Soviet Union's Project 903, which developed into the BMP series, or the American M42 Duster. In the early 60s, the US decided to create a light tank based on the chassis of the M41A3 Walker Bulldog. The new vehicle would replace both the M41 and the M551 Sheridan, although the US Army wanted the new tank to be called the M552. The project was classified as top secret, and the existence of the machine was not even supposed to be acknowledged. And yet, there are several renders, drawings, and photos of this vehicle, which shows us how cool this machine could have looked like. But let's start with the most important thing, the armament. At first, the military thought of mounting a 90mm gun on the tank. However, they rejected this idea because such a weapon would have been too heavy and would require a lot of maintenance. Instead, they decided to mount a 75mm gun. This was the same caliber that was used on the T-72 main battle tank. However, unlike the T-72, this cannon had a semi-automatic loader. This meant that the tank crew would not have to manually load the shells, which would save them valuable seconds during combat. What's interesting is that, according to some sources, the vehicle was originally designed to carry two types of ammunition, armor-piercing and high-explosive fragmentation. But later on, the military requested that it be modified to fire only armor-piercing rounds. This is probably because the developers ran into problems with fitting the shells inside the hull of the tank. But more on that later. The 75mm gun had a semi-automatic loader with 22 rounds stored in a carousel. There was also a coaxial 12.7mm heavy machine gun with 600 rounds. Additionally, the tank could be equipped with two 7.62mm machine guns with 3,000 rounds. But this number might be inaccurate, since some sources say that the vehicle was designed to carry only 1,800 rounds. Either way, if you watched our videos about the M42 Duster or the IRST, you know that both vehicles suffered from carrying too little ammo. This seems to be a common problem for wheeled vehicles. The main armament of the tank had a fully stabilized fire control stabilization system, which allowed it to accurately hit targets at night, on the move, and even on hilly terrain. The 75mm gun was also equipped with a radar rangefinder. With this piece of technology, the tank could determine the distance to the target without additional equipment. However, this is not the only interesting fact about the armament of this vehicle. You see, the designers did not just want to mount a regular 75mm gun onto the hull of the tank. This was probably because the military didn't believe in the effectiveness of the new gun. According to some sources, the XM174 was supposed to be an improved version of the T-72's 75mm gun. That is, its caliber remained the same. But this is not entirely true. You see, the main difference between the XM174 and the 75mm gun was in the rifling of the barrel. The XM174 used the new method of manufacturing, which made the barrel smoother, allowing the shell to fly faster and farther. In addition, the new gun had a semi-automatic loader, which was a big deal back then. What's really interesting is that, according to some sources, the T-72 was also supposed to use the XM174 gun. But again, apparently no one believed in the project and it was abandoned. So why didn't the US military equip the tank with this new gun? We can only speculate. Perhaps they really didn't believe in the XM174's potential. Or maybe they saw the whole project as too expensive. After all, developing new equipment always costs a lot of money and resources. Or maybe the military just didn't need this vehicle at all. After all, the M41A3 Walker Bulldog was still relevant, and the Sheridan was still in production. The truth is, we may never know the real reason. But that doesn't stop us from making assumptions. But let's get back to the tank. As we mentioned earlier, the project was classified as top secret, and the crew was not supposed to talk about it. However, it seems that this rule was not applied to the press. In 1962, the magazine Army Talk published an article in which they talked about an unknown vehicle that was being tested in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The article said that the tank would replace the M41 and the M551, and that it be armed with a 75mm gun. The article also mentioned that the test crew was very impressed with the tank and that it was, quote, much better than anything they had seen before. But this was the only mention of this vehicle in the media. What's really surprising is that the magazine had a photo of the tank, but it was heavily censored. Only the front of the vehicle could be seen, and even the logo of the manufacturer was removed. Over time, rumors about the tank began to spread among military personnel. Some said that it was a myth, while others claimed to have seen the vehicle with their own eyes. However, none of them could provide any evidence to support their claims. The truth is that this tank was actually created, but it was never publicly acknowledged. In the early 70s, the military became interested in creating a new light tank. It had to be fast, maneuverable, and have a powerful gun. As a result, they created the M42 Duster, which was armed with a 105mm howitzer. However, this vehicle had many problems. First of all, it had a very limited range of fire. Secondly, it did not have enough armor. Thirdly, it carried too little ammunition. And finally, the weapon itself was quite complicated and required a lot of maintenance. That is why the military decided to create a new vehicle that would be armed with a 75mm gun. This was an unusual choice, since all other light tanks of that era were armed with either a 76mm or a 90mm gun. But this didn't stop the military. They ordered the creation of 3 prototypes, which were manufactured by the company's General Dynamics, Ford and American, in 1963. But just like the XM174 gun, these prototypes were never finished. What's really interesting is that, according to some sources, the General Dynamics prototype was almost finished, but it was destroyed in a fire. This sounds pretty suspicious, especially considering that the project was classified as top secret. Perhaps the military wanted to hide the fact that they were developing a new tank. Maybe they were afraid that the Soviet Union would find out about it and try to destroy the vehicle or something else entirely. We can only speculate. But one thing is for sure, the General Dynamics prototype did exist, and it was almost finished. But for some reason, the military did not want to acknowledge it. In 1964, the military conducted a series of tests to determine the fate of the tank. The tests showed that the vehicle was too heavy, slow, and had a weak gun. That is why the military decided to abandon it. They officially explained this decision by saying that the requirements for a new tank were constantly changing. That's why the military needed a versatile vehicle that could perform multiple tasks. But again, we can only speculate about the real reasons. After the project was abandoned, the prototypes were scrapped. However, some of the parts were taken for further development of other vehicles. For example, the engine and transmission were used on the M901 ITV. As for the tank itself, it was classified as top secret until recently, but now we can talk about it freely. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content.